Hey, hello, leavers and believers. Welcome to Leaving Hillsong. My name's Tanya, and I'm so happy that you have decided to spend a bit of time with us here. Today we are jumping into what we call a Case Notes special. Case Notes is like a spin-off. It's like a Joni Loves Chachi to this Happy Days, and it's to do with mental health. And our consultant is James, and he joins me today. He is a very highly qualified person in the field of mental health, and we'll keep it as broad as that, but he does work directly in the field. And we ended up having one of those random chats earlier in the week when quickly decided it would make for a good episode. Wow, where to start? Well, yeah, I'll just leave it to you to investigate it. We're having a look at the wondrousness that Instagram has brought out in all of us, but especially in people who like to have themselves looked at. And I'll just jump into the episode. Here's a giant slot machine with James. Hey there, James.
Hi, Tanya. How are you?
Good. Long time. How have you been?
It's been, good, busy, and it's great to catch up again.
Thank you so much for giving up your time. I know you've been working a lot of hours actually on the coalface there out there in the world of mental health. So thank you so much for we got into a conversation earlier in the week about what is a Bobby Houston? What does one make of that? And she's been posting all these kinds of things, and you brought up some ideas, and thank you. We'll run through them. Yeah, I mean, you want to have a look at some of the posts over the last couple of weeks? Is that a good place to start?
Let's jump down the rabbit hole, eh?
Oh, there's no coming back. So should have found this one already. Oh, here it is. So Bobby posted on Instagram on Valentine's Day under a heading, "The Man I Know and Love." And she captions the picture Brian C. Houston surrounded with street kids from Vision Rescue India for people who aren't blocked by the pastor. And she says, as a wife of near 46 years, I'm weary of the relentless assault on this man, weary of the unchallenged, uncontained narratives. Whoever taught those people the word narrative, I am coming for you. Left to fester. I had vowed to him last year that if no one stands up and vindicates his integrity, character, and worth, I will. And I'll die on my sword if need be. That might sound dramatic, but I have no reason to say otherwise. Modern day persecution is accusatory, cowardly, and appalling. Those who perpetrate it should be sued for defamation and damaging bullying. But because that isn't the nature of Christ, we will continue to pray for you. Just remember, dear ones, that the courts of heaven, and they've got capital letters, courts of heaven, exist, and no action or word or ill intent goes unobserved. While it is still day, capital letter day in quotes, there is grace to recover and change your ways, but a day will come when that day may expire. Don't risk that, nor boast of tomorrow, for none of us know what a day will bring. His grace is all sufficient, but it has to be embraced. For those curious but uninformed about the court case Brian can't speak of it for legal reasons, but I can. Firstly, all caps, thank you, one word, to all who prayed, thousands around the world. We endured 13, it was actually 14, days in court. The Crown prosecutor presented 8 witnesses. Our defence presented 1. Brian Houston. All evidence was heard. or evidence is recorded. Now the case is adjourned till June for oral and written summaries. It's called closing arguments. Final arguments, and then the magistrate alone will rule. My husband is a champion, and to endure this after 24 years says much about his stoic spirit. As a family, we say, capital T, thank you, one word, for your love and concern. I'm only posting this because many are unaware. Some media outlets report with integrity, others don't. There are no restrictions on Brian. Again, we are grateful for those who prayed and ask that you continue in the meantime. We soldier on alongside our King, believing that the finest days for the body of Christ are before us all. Days for boldness and courage, for living in the truth of who Christ is, for knowing the power of his Spirit, and for loving not one's life unto death. Revelation. Days of great harvest in Jesus' dear and glorious name. B.
Well, Tanya.
Over to you.
That was enough. Oh, what a shame. I think she upstaged Adolf Hitler.
In terms of, sorry, I shouldn't laugh. What?
Rhetoric, political rhetoric, and veiled and unveiled threats. It's a kind of a confusing message, isn't it? Because on one hand, you've got all the Christian church speak, and then you've got it goes beyond passive aggressive expression, doesn't it? It's I find it menacing.
Well, yeah, there is a bit of you're being watched. You haven't got forever.
And a huge dose of self-righteousness as well.
Oh.
Lack of introspection, a lack of reflection, persecution complex, the martyr complex. But I don't know, let's keep things simple, eh? There are simple solutions to this, and we know of the abuse of people, the crimes against children that have occurred, and that's what this trial is actually about. It's not about someone being persecuted for their faith. It's actually whether someone broken a law or not. Someone has breached certain clauses in the Crimes Act. So, golly gosh, what can you say to that?
It's just, I defer to your professional expertise, of course, but of all, this discussion again about narcissism and people with lack of empathy, and we've talked about it obviously in the pod before and what's affecting people, but it's almost as if people have studied some kind of textbook because they check all these boxes, totally rewritten this story as her husband is a victim of an assault and this ongoing, persecution. It's and look, it's a common. We tend to half joke about it in the field I work in. Often is someone mad, bad, or sad. And look, we don't use that language with people, in our interactions with people. But sometimes you're asking the question, you're trying to explore the evidence, and for someone's presentation in a mental health psychiatric sense, what's going on? Is it sadness, madness, or badness? Is it mental illness? Is it to do with antisocial or narcissistic personality or something else? And it's hard to kind of understand a person's motives, what makes them tick, what drives them. The things that I'm kind of interested in, does someone fundamentally have a good, well-structured sense of self? And are they a person of conscience? Are they fundamentally a decent soul, or are they fundamentally a bereft or malevolent soul? That's not psychiatric language, but that's what I'm interested in. We are offered this opportunity to look at somebody in detail because they keep advertising it. And yeah, how do you define malevolence, or, you know, at what point is somebody a bad person, or that kind of thing? So how do you, what do you mean by malevolence then?
Well, okay, so unfortunately in this world, there are people who have little to no regard for others. They don't care about the well-being or welfare of others. They don't care if they hurt others. And worse still, there are those that highly motivated to inflict pain upon other persons or animals or things for their own perverse pleasure.
Mm.
You know, thinking of the criminal psychopath, that's probably the worst. You know, imagine a victim pleading for mercy, but it's falling on deaf ears because the perpetrator, they've got no feeling. You know, they've got no feeling for someone. They might even delight in it because, you know, higher levels of stimulation to get some kind of, you know, arousal or response themselves. They need higher levels of adrenaline to feel something. You know, that's probably the scarier part. But then people's motives or intentions, you know, what drives people fundamentally, you know, and self-examination is really important. I think, you know, the field that I work, you know, having reflective skills and practices and being mindful of your responses or reactions or conduct when you're in that therapy situation, it's absolutely essential.
There's nobody else in this post. Well, I mean, now that you mention it, there's no one else on the planet for her. There's only people that should really be praying for them.
Yeah.
It's so elevated, or do you know what I mean? It's really up high now. I
was just going to say, I think what's concerning though, as someone who was previously involved in Hillsong Church for a time, it was interesting in retrospect to see how things played out, to see what people's behaviours were, to see because, you know, if you've lived somewhere else and you maybe been part of a church and you just sang the songs and bought the CDs and even watched the videos, you know, every year they'd release a CD and a DVD sort of thing, you can get a very false impression of what it's really like there. You can think, oh, gee, isn't that wonderful? They're all singing and clapping and, you know, twiddling their guitars on the way to heaven sort of thing. But being there, it's just not like that at all. There was significant, you know, well-organised controls over people, coercion, young people enslaved. I'm talking about the college students, and very scary attitudes. Now, I mean, if you've ever been part of a group or worked in an organisation where they have, you know, generally an open door policy, and you know, you might be a certain rung in the ladder, but there's nothing stopping you from having a conversation with someone several rungs up, you know, that's all good. But when you go to Hillsong and you see that you must not make eye contact with the people in the inner circle, you know, your Houstons and their closest sycophants, you're not to make eye contact with them, you're not to approach them, you're not to talk to them. There's what would we call it? You know, there's an air of elitism about them when they're shut away and they're behind their frosted glass doors being waited on hand and foot. And, you know that you're one of the plebs.
Yeah.
What drives that? How can people be so elite in something that's supposed to be all about the love of God and equality and
justice? And I mean, wasn't that supposed to be the point of difference in this movement? Was that it was, you know, it didn't have the rules and the structures and the rituals and the rigidity, and everybody, you know, God is not a lover of men. And
Animal Farm, didn't it, really? You know, a bit of, you know, George Orwell. It was very much an Animal Farm situation. And it's made me think of concepts, you know, we were talking about it, like megalomania or hubris. If there are other drivers, like I think I've coined this word anti-sociability, or I'm talking about in terms of antisocial or narcissism or narcissistic personality. These are, you know,
And we touched, I remember, on histrionic as well for Roberta Lee here. But this isn't very, I mean, a histrionic is stuff about kind of the same sort of narcissism, please you tell me. The same sort of stuff, but more kind of flirtatious and that kind of thing. This is very Marta-like, isn't it? She's
definitely, yeah. And when we've talked about the traditional clusters of personalities, we spoke about that cluster in the middle. Cluster B, creatively, the dramatic or erratic types. You've got your histrionic, narcissistic, antisocial, and borderline.
What's megalomania then, as opposed to narcissism?
All right, so megalomania could be defined as something delusional, a delusional belief in one's own importance or how powerful or great they are, the megalomaniac, as opposed to maybe hubris or hubris syndrome, which is a phenomena associated with someone possessing power. If a person,
okay,
they may not have necessarily been had a mental illness or a significant personality disorder, but if they attain to a position of power, and the longer they're in that position, grow to love that power, love exercising that power, and not want to relinquish it.
Hang on, I just Googled. It says here, beware of Hubris Syndrome, a leadership personality disorder. Look, I'll send this to you. As we kind of talked earlier in the week, Roberta Lee McDonald was not born into greatness. She's half Tongan girl that lived in New Zealand and met a guy on a beach, as she just got, she talks about in a later post. She met her boyfriend young and married him. And when I was attending Hills Christian Life Centre, which became Hillsong, she was Brian's wife. She wasn't a pastor then. She didn't have a platform. And yet, slowly but surely, this little duck to water has done quite well to embrace all of those kinds of, big things. So that question of kind of like, is someone born a narcissist? Can you pick it up later? Like, I don't know, playing the violin when you're 40 or something. I mean, how does it happen that someone can start demonstrating so much personality coldness and power? I don't know. Sorry, you tell me. Sorry.
That's splitting hairs, or we're guilty of, character analysis or assassination. The notion of a hubris syndrome, it's not really associated with someone with a major mental illness per se. So if someone, experiences schizophrenia or a really troubling mental illness like that, it's not really associated with that. Someone with a, we call a bipolar 1 mood disorder, that's, the really significant disorder where a person can have depressive episodes, but they can have really, really dramatic manic episodes, like really crazy. And that person might experience grandiosity or grandiose delusions. But then, and thank you for the article you just sent. I think I've read this one.
My research is, I took the second one out of Google, so that's a bit more in depth.
Maybe looking at some of these mega church leaders and the such, you ask the question, what's their personality like underneath it all? Are they a person of empathy, a person of altruism, of benevolence, of beneficence, a person of goodness? They want to do good and they don't want to do harm. They're probably the questions I'd be asking. Or do they have sufficient personality disorder traits whereby they might be narcissistic or antisocial or whatever the case may be, but then maybe someone's got the traits and not enough of them to really have a full-blown disorder, but they attain to power, a position of power.
Okay.
And they're quite happy with the self-glorification and the elevation and the power that goes with that. They're obsessed with their image. Actually, this is good. Look, this is textbook. A loss of contact with reality. They, as a messiah, have excessive self-confidence accompanied by contempt for advice or criticism of others, an almost obsessive focus on personal image. Gee, what about this couple that we've frequently seen in Twitter and elsewhere? Reckless and impulsive actions. Yeah, we've seen a bit of that lately. A bit of
God will, a higher court, perhaps God will vindicate you, is word for word.
Yeah, that's the one. Owen and Davidson noted the overlap with other personality disorders, especially narcissistic personality disorder. 7 of the 14 symptoms are also symptoms of NPD, narcissistic personality disorder, and 2 symptoms are shared with antisocial personality disorder and histrionic personality disorder. This is interesting, isn't it?
Bingo 12 times across the board. Thank
5 of the symptoms: conflating yourself with the organisation, using the royal we, at a higher court, perhaps God will vindicate you.
Wow.
Restlessness, recklessness, and impulsiveness, and a righteousness that ignores practicalities or cost are unique to the Hubris syndrome.
You've really nailed it with that one. That was because remember you said to me earlier in the week, you're like, do you think it's Hubris syndrome or narcissism? I'd never heard of it until you raised it. And This is, believing that a higher court, perhaps God will, as in the courts of heaven.
Yeah.
Wow.
Hate them, but will condemn or judge or whatever everyone else for those who challenge or go against their authority.
And, I cannot tell you the number of leaders and people in the organization that cannot believe how they were treated for, similar allegations or divorces, affairs, those kinds of things. They were absolutely ousted without any hesitation. And yet,
Yeah, I know. This is a really key article. Good to share with the broader listening public, wouldn't it? Beware of Hubris syndrome, a leadership personality disorder.
Relevant magazine and relevant it is. I'll post that, but it's pretty easily Googleable. Let's just jump to her next. Not long after, I think it was a couple of days after that, Brian's made some comments somewhere, and he says, I love to inspire and exhort people by pointing them to God's purpose. And Laura comes along with a love heart, and just like a big love heart of complicity. Then Bobby comes along and says, yes, you do. And I will gladly follow in your shadow. XOX. Now, what is this about? The sword falling upon him and dying and shadow following. Does Brian need a restraining order at this point? Because somebody actually said to me, oh man, she is just emasculating him. She doesn't need to tell the world that, that she's going to stand by him if no one else will.
Well, look, one, it's a little echo chamber going on between them, isn't it? But, maybe for the likes of us and many others who don't already see how preposterous it really is, I think they're going to start to get a sense that, what is it? Houston, we have a problem.
Well, and it's incredible because that post where she talks about 8 witnesses being called to testify against her husband, she was there. The prosecution, I was there. The prosecution called 8 witnesses. One of them was George. One of them was Keith Ainge. Some of these people just were giving evidence. They weren't testifying against her assaulted husband. And yet, so she's attempted to create this kind of, huge pile-on that's happening. That didn't happen. And it's been interpreted that obviously there's 8 people all against him. He's got to be guilty if 8 people have done that. So it's this, it's at her own cost, this kind of attitude, hey?
Oh, it's under the bus. It's not in vogue to be defending him anymore. And they all wanted impunity themselves too by from what I've heard and read. You were there. You probably understand that a bit better than I do.
There were some very nice things said about him, though. So, I mean, Keith Ainge was the secretary of the AOG. He described Brian as, you know, a man he had no question about his integrity. There weren't 8 witnesses against this poor guy. It's just this, you know, again, what does she really think?
The persecution complex, yeah.
Yeah, but it's not even within reality. I don't know that you could dig a deeper grave if you tried. Do you know, I don't think you could paint yourself into a worse corner.
It would have been better doing what, you know, the late Her Majesty said, wasn't it? Was never explain, never complain.
Trust me,
Yeah.
right? I learned it a bit late, but shutting up is not the worst move. And then there are people out there who have loyally seen this person, trusted her as a women's leader. The effect that can have on people who have looked up to her as a leader of women is, you know, there's been talk of alcoholism, there's been talk of infidelity or sexual harassment, that kind of thing. And her response is to double down and throw herself on her sword and in the shadows and,
Very melodramatic, isn't it? Quite histrionic.
You know, there was a comment that said, you know, this is sad and honestly shocking. Sisterhood was actually a front for oppression of women, masking as purpose. You know, and you never hear of a pastor's wife deciding to leave after these kind of incidents. You know, almost never, that otherwise she'd be ostracized. And the message is you just put up with whatever. And you know, it's a little bit more serious than an Instagram comment. Is one of the people pay close attention to what she says.
Yeah.
She's got some responsibility to not just pump out bad Hallmark cards or whatever's going on here.
Well, one thing we know, Tanya, as soon as he was ousted, she followed a few seconds later, didn't she? You know, she wasn't going to have a place without him there. But you wonder who really wore or wears the pants.
You're the professional.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you see? And I mean, you've been married for a long time as well. So this is within your realms of 3 areas of expertise, having experienced Hillsong as well. I mean,
or about, you know, Nikolai and Elena Kashescu.
Well, tell me about them. I mean,
former president of Romania, terrible despot. You know, the Romanian people suffered under his dictatorship. I worked with someone who was in the healthcare system in Romania under the Ceausescu era. And some interesting and troubling to hear just how bad it was and the paranoia generated amongst the people. You know, they never knew who to trust. But and they were shot, they were executed. Yep, they got what they deserved after the regime fell. But she was apparently the one who wore the pants. She was the real brain, the evil brains and the evil mastermind.
How?